Have you ever felt your throat tighten before you even understood why? Have you ever tried to hold it in, but your eyes betrayed you? You didn't want to cry. You weren't trying to make a scene. You weren't looking for attention. It just happened. In the moment it did, you felt exposed. You looked away, you apologized, you felt embarrassed for having a reaction you couldn't control. Maybe someone said it out loud. You're too sensitive. You cry over everything. You need to toughen up. Or worse, they didn't say anything at all. They just looked uncomfortable, awkward, distant. And in that moment, you didn't just feel emotional. You felt wrong. Wrong for feeling so deeply. Wrong for reacting so strongly. Wrong for being someone whose emotions show. So you learned something silently. Crying makes people pull away, and from that point on, every tear carried shame with it. But here's the truth most people never hear. People who cry easily aren't weak. They're carrying a nervous system that processes the world more deeply than most. What you've been taught about crying is wrong. We're taught something very early, that strength looks controlled, that maturity looks calm, that crying is a loss of composure. So if you cry easily, you assume something must be wrong with you, that you lack resilience, that you're emotionally unstable, that you can't handle life. But psychology tells a very different story. Crying easily has very little to do with weakness and everything to do with how your brain processes emotion, threat, and connection. The problem isn't that you cry. The problem is that society only respects emotions that are quiet, convenient, and easy to ignore. So when your emotions surface honestly, they make people uncomfortable. Not because you're broken, but because you're real. 1. Crying is a nervous system response, not a character flaw. Crying isn't a decision, it's a physiological response. When emotion crosses a certain threshold, your nervous system releases tears to regulate intensity. For people who cry easily, that threshold is lower, not because they're fragile, but because their nervous system is more responsive. You feel faster, deeper, more accurately. Your brain detects emotional shifts before your conscious mind can catch up. So by the time you think, "I'm fine," your body already knows, you're not. That doesn't mean you lack control. It means your system is honest, and honesty in a world that rewards suppression often gets labeled as weakness. 2. Crying easily is linked to high emotional sensitivity. Some people feel emotions like background noise. Others feel them like full-volume sound. If you cry easily, you likely have high emotional sensitivity. That means you pick up on tone changes, you notice emotional undercurrents, you feel meaning behind words, you absorb other people's moods. Your system doesn't just process what's said, it processes what's felt. That level of perception is powerful, but it comes with a cost, because when you feel everything, you don't get the luxury of emotional distance. So while others stay composed, you feel it fully. And feeling fully often leaks out through tears. 3. Why crying triggers rejection fear. Here's where the pain deepens. Most people who cry easily don't fear the emotion itself. They fear what comes after, the subtle withdrawal, the discomfort, the change in how they're treated. Because crying breaks an unspoken rule. Don't make others deal with your feelings. So when you cry, you feel like you're violating something. You worry you're too much, too emotional, too needy, too intense. And that fear creates a split inside you. Part of you needs to release emotion. Another part of you is terrified of being rejected for it. So every tear feels dangerous, not because of the feeling, but because of what it might cost you socially. 4. Crying easily often means you're highly empathetic. People who cry easily cry not just for themselves, but for others. You feel stories deeply. You feel injustice intensely. You feel other people's pain as if it were your own. That's empathy at a nervous system level. But empathy without boundaries is exhausting, so tears become the outlet when there's nowhere else for that emotional energy to go.
It's not weakness, it's open emotional circuitry. 5. Why you were taught to be ashamed of this. Modern culture glorifies emotional suppression. We praise calmness, detachment, rationality, especially in adults, especially in leadership. So emotional expression, especially crying, gets framed as instability. But suppression doesn't equal strength. It just means emotion goes underground, and underground emotions don't disappear. They show up as anxiety, numbness, burnout, or emptiness. Crying is visible. That's why it's judged. Not because it's harmful, but because it's honest. Your brain isn't broken. From a psychological perspective, people who cry easily often have high emotional reactivity, strong limbic system responses, and lower emotional inhibition. This isn't pathology, this is temperament. Your brain prioritizes emotional processing over emotional suppression. That makes you deeply perceptive, highly relational, emotionally intelligent. But in a world that values control over connection, that intelligence often goes unrecognized. You were never too much. What if crying easily was never the problem? What if the real pain came from being told your emotions were inconvenient? You weren't too sensitive, you were just surrounded by people who didn't know how to hold emotion. You weren't weak, you were expressive in a culture that fears vulnerability, and over time, you internalized that fear. Crying is regulation, not failure. Crying helps regulate the nervous system. It releases stress hormones. It activates soothing responses. It restores emotional balance. Suppressing tears actually keeps stress trapped inside the body. So when you cry, your system is doing exactly what it's designed to do, not failing, regulating. The permission you never got. You're allowed to feel deeply. You're allowed to cry without apologizing. You're allowed to have emotions that don't fit into neat, acceptable boxes. Crying doesn't make you weak. It means your system is alive, responsive, and honest. In the moment you stop judging your tears is the moment they stop feeling like a flaw and start feeling like truth.
If you love new knowledge to improve your life, hit subscribe now.